I now call to order this regular meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. We'll have an invocation by Ms. Cleveland, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller. Please stand as you're able.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Mr. Miller, are there any amendments to the agenda?
No, sir.
Moving on to public comment. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to speak this evening? Please come up to the microphone here, state your name and the organization you're representing, or your address, and go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Dale Hamas. I'm a partner with Green Energy Ventures, and we have a property submitted for rezoning to the Board of Supervisors for data centers. I live in Leesburg, Virginia. I worked in Loudoun County for the water utility there. And I was there 40 years. And when I started in 1977, that water utility was about the size that yours is today. I don't pretend to know a whole lot about everything, but I did learn a lot in 40 years in the water business. So the comments that I'm offering today are regarding the MOU that you have for water supply with Birchwood. I'm familiar with that water system. I'm a little familiar with your system, and I am familiar with the permitting and the challenges that you face whenever you do very new and very large water supply planning. And I see that's what you're doing as you prepare for the comprehensive plan that your Board of Supervisors has approved. So I encourage you to think about water, to think very, very hard about the agreement that you may have to implement the MOU. I know the devil is in the details with regard to rates, supply, conditions of supply, and all those things that are very important, not only to you and your customers, but to the regulatory agencies, to the bonding companies and the rating agencies that you'll deal with, that they want to see a real solid water supply plan, something that will serve you well into the future and your citizens as well. So as I look at, well, I don't see the clock, but as I'm thinking about time, I want to be respectful of time. I do think that water should be in the public domain as much as possible. I think you should have the ability to decide where, when, and how to use that water in any way that best serves you and your community and your customers, and helps you implement and discharge your duty to rather implement the comprehensive plan that you have before you. I know there's a lot of work to be done, and I encourage you. I think it's a good thing that you're working towards an agreement. I think it's a good thing that you're working towards getting off of groundwater, and I'm familiar with the Potomac Aquifer and all the problems the region has using groundwater and the need to move to surface water. So a lot of encouragement, a lot of good luck in your efforts to implement a really sound, resilient, and reliable water system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak?
Good afternoon, board members and county staff. My name is Hobie Mitchell. I'm managing partner at Green Energy Ventures, and I was also a 20-year board member for public utility, water and sewer utility in Northern Virginia. So quite familiar. I was chair of the finance committee of our board because we did have a lot of money. We had a AAA bond rating, by the way, so we were very, very good.
Yeah, see,
before. Hello?
Baby. Like that, going traveling in a plane. I'll check.
I'll wait for this to end. Okay, good. we're also, as repeating what Dale said, we're glad to see that you're getting into the water business using surface water, because you have to deal with that problem that's existing right now for the county and DEQ. All we're saying is that you should have enough of it. You have to have a plan of finance. You have to have customers, whether it's raw water or potable water, to help finance the construction of any facility and the distribution, but also for paying for operational side. And for that, you need customers. 600,000 gallons is all you have for the existing customers and people you have. But you need to be able to finance the infrastructure in order to do that, whether it's treatment and all that. You need utility connection fees, and you need availability, which are availability fees, but also for user fees, whether it's raw water or potable water. And we're suggesting that you need to look at that in the agreement. 600,000 gallons, I think it should be a higher number for your purposes, because you should be the one in the water and the sewer business, and be able to get enough of it so you can finance your capital improvement programs when it becomes necessary. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to working with the county.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? Anyone online, Mr. Gines?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we will close public comment for this evening. Reports from members of the board. Ms. Binder?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the folks from Green Energy Ventures for coming out and give us some insight. Thank you very much. I would like to point out we did have our budget budget hearing on June 28th, and some of us had some good conversation with some citizens who had concerns that came to the meeting, and I think it was a fruitful discussion. And I had talked to Mr. Miller earlier and just give a comment about it. I did have one of the residents ask when our FAQ would be done for the questions on the Service Authority.
No, yes, ma'am, and we will sit down with Ms. Southall and start developing that with the staff at the Service Authority as well, and start preparing some FAQs. Probably run it by you guys, make sure that we're capturing what you're looking for before we put it on there.
Thank you. I told her it's on our way. It's a new project, and we're getting the information out there. Our staff has been doing a great job about updating our website and getting more information. I also want to have a shout out to our maintenance staff. Two of the residents that came had a concern about their water, and they went out the next day to look at it. And the customer was very happy with how it was all handled, and had some education on what their problem was and a little more understanding. So thank you for the maintenance staff to go out and assist the customer and help them to a better understanding. And that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you. Yes. The only thing that I had to pass today is I had a constituent ask me about the Fairview Beach well and the proposed new well. And I was wondering if you could give a little bit of information in your manager's report, any updates.
Did you say on the Fairview Beach well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Kopka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening and providing your comment to us. We appreciate your time and your interest. And I would just echo the comments that Ms. Binder had regarding the public hearing and getting in touch with constituents. And I, too, was going to ask that question, are the frequently asked questions ready yet? And Ms. Cleveland, you took my question as well. So I likewise heard from a constituent about the proposed new site for Fairview Beach. So thank you very much.
Mr. Morris?
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your comments this evening. And thank you, my colleagues, for taking all the questions. And that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, and just to cap off our reports, I do want to reiterate a thank you to Green Energy Ventures for coming out and speaking tonight. We always like to hear comments from the general public on any of the matters we're considering. And I do reiterate Ms. Binder and Ms. Kupka's analysis of the budget meeting. It was very good to sit down after it and talk to some of the constituents and just answer some of the questions and just alleviate some of their concerns. And that's it for my board report. Moving on, we'll go to the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Report from the county attorney, Ms. Lackey.
I don't have any general information this evening. Thank you.
Seeing as there's no presentations and reports, we will move on to action items. First up is the Freedom of Information Cost Policy and Plain English Overview. Back to you, Ms. Lackey.
Good evening. From the outside, I want to say this is under action items, but on further review, this is an optional action item. The new statutory language requires state public bodies and local governing bodies of a certain size to have a FOIA cost policy. So in my opinion, the authority is not required to have a policy, but it is a kind of a best practice. It's something that I would still recommend if there's the willingness of the board to consider it. So in your agenda packet, there's a proposed policy. The public bodies that have to have this kind of a policy has to do two things. The new component as of July 1 is it has to have a methodology for costs if you're going to charge costs. And secondly, you're supposed to have a plain English statement of FOIA rights and responsibilities. Most of what is proposed as a plain English statement is parallel to provisions that the model template that's distributed by the Virginia Freedom of Information Council has. But within it, in addition to trying to state in common English what are the rights of a requester and what are the responsibilities of the custodian of records under the policy, there are some optional provisions. So firstly, as I mentioned, it would be how costs are assessed. And then the other major component, which is an optional provision, is to give a general description of how exemptions are applied. So the Freedom of Information Act pertains to records. And then there are various sections that provide for either mandatory or discretionary exemptions. Most public bodies apply the exemptions whether or not they're mandatory or discretionary. That way you're not making decisions by what to release based on who the requester is and what they're asking. There's usually a sound reason in law why an exemption is provided in the first place. A lot of them are for privacy expectations. For example, there's one specific to customer account information that it would extend to the identity of people who hold accounts with the service authority. And so the draft is for your consideration, but it largely tracks the recommendations to the 2018 policy that the Board of Supervisors will also be taking a look at tonight. But once again, it is an optional policy, but it is something that you all might want to consider, just so that anybody who does have questions, they know what the ground rules are and know how you all want costs and exemptions to be applied.
So I guess we'll take some comments and questions for Ms. Lackey.
Did you say that the Board of Supervisors are going to be looking at this tonight and voting on it, or?
So it's on the Board of Supervisors agenda. They do have an existing policy that meets the requirements of the law, so I don't know if they're going to make changes to that policy. But the policy in your packet would meet the updated version that's proposed for the Board of Supervisors.
So I would recommend that we wait to have them look at it first and see if they want any changes made. That would be my recommendation to the board.
Yeah, I think we should mirror the county policy, but I do think we should have something written down so then there is no question when these issues arise.
I have a good question. Just do you know offhand how many FOIA requests do we get for the service authority? Probably not a big number.
Offhand, it'd be hard for me to say. I don't see many for the service authority comparatively with the county. So the service authority gets relatively few. I think they're more customer inquiries based, the ones that Patty and her staff can, they can respond directly to, what was my bill last month? I didn't get a copy of it. Can I have another copy? And so those are things would fall within the 30 minutes or less of staff time. They wouldn't be billed. There wouldn't be exemptions that would have to be reviewed. So by and large, the ones that are handled are relatively simple customer service requests.
Thank you.
So just so I'm understanding, we don't have a FOIA policy currently in the service authority, correct?
There's not a separately existing FOIA policy that I'm aware of for the service authority. Informally, staff has kind of been paralleling what the Board of Supervisors does.
So I guess what we could do this evening is just basically have the service authorities FOIA policy mirror the policy of the Board of Supervisors in the general county.
That's one option. So the draft in your packet has a few differences just because as I mentioned, there is that one exemption that applies only to utility accounts. And then there's just a slightly different process between how it's delineated for staff to handle it, because there's just a lot more staff on the county side than on the service authority side. But the costs and the exemptions are all proposed to be applied the same way.
So I guess what are the thoughts then? Do we want to, since we don't have a formal policy, do we want to adopt this since it mirrors the county policy with changes that are specific to the service authority, or do we want to wait on the county because we still need to adopt one for here? Either way, but there might be slight differences if the county doesn't adopt this one.
Right. So currently, Ms. Fish is serving as the FOIA officer for both the service authority and the county. And I think you all are aware the county's website is getting an overhaul. So what I envision is probably a landing page for FOIA requests, whether it's service authority or county. If there are separate policies, there could be links to both, but there could be kind of similar to the frequently asked questions that we were just discussing. There could be some bullet points of the commonalities for quick reference for people.
So what is everybody's kind of will? What do we want to vote and have this policy, or do we want to hold off until the supervisors take a look? But we need to put a policy in place, I think, at some point formally for here.
So I believe two of our colleagues have already spoken up. If you're looking for a third one, I agree with them. Why don't we just wait, see what the Board of Supervisors adopts? And then if there are any necessary changes, Ms. Lackey can make those and bring them back to us at the next meeting in August. Thank you.
All right. So let's do that then. We'll put off the vote on it, but see what gets voted on tonight at the supervisors meeting, and then if there's any needed adjustments to mimic what the changes are, bring it back at the next meeting so we can take a formal vote on it.
Sure. And in particular, when you're reviewing the drafting, one difference that is between the policy for the service authority and the Board of Supervisors was because you all didn't have a policy before, I tried to put kind of two provisions, an overview section at the very top to kind of hit on those kind of probably the most frequently asked questions. Where do I put my request, and what information should I know from the outset? So if there's any comments on that, I'd be happy to receive them through individual members of the Board of Directors if you have any.
All right, we'll move on from that and go to the Walnut Hill Agreement Amendment. Ms. Lackey again.
So as you will recall, Walnut Hill representatives were here tonight. They were also present at the May 2nd and June 6th meetings. Their initial request was for a waiver of a few of the provisions of Section 27 of the Service Authority regulations. My direction from the board was to go ahead and suggest some amendments to that section, which you all adopted at your last meeting on June 20th. So now the request has shifted just a bit. So there's no waiver request. Now what they're requesting is a cost reimbursement agreement, which fits within the letter of what the revised regulations are. Their situation is a little bit unique in that they have an existing cost reimbursement, but you'll recall that they are looking to get some more density out of the property to make their development more financially feasible and technically feasible and viable. What they would like to do is for the cost reimbursement to be based on the cost estimate that was prepared for the original subdivision with fewer lots. However, staff have reviewed that cost estimate. They think it's very reasonable. They think if anything, it would be detrimental to the service authority if the costs were possibly recalculated. So what I've heard from the engineering staff is that they believe it would be reasonable to continue to apply the cost estimate that was prepared with the prior agreement. And if this prior agreement is approved, it would only become effective in the event that the subdivision is approved for greater density.
So are there any questions, comments for Ms. Lackey? All right, then we're looking for, I guess, a vote to accept or to have myself or the interim general manager, Mr. Miller, execute the agreement.
I'll move adoption of the revised water and sewer extension, expansion, and reimbursement agreement as presented.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. We can execute the amended agreement. Last on the list of action items is the proposed memorandum of understanding with Birchwood Power Partners for surface water and land dedication. Ms. Lackey.
So folks have heard a little bit about the proposed memorandum of understanding from the public comment, but to give a little background for anyone who this is completely new business, Birchwood Power Partners is proposing a data center campuses in King George. So they have pending land use applications that are going to be considered next week by the Planning Commission and then presumably at a future date by the Board of Supervisors. The former Birchwood Power Plant has an existing surface water intake. Surface water is not well water. We're talking about river water, specifically water drawn from the Rappahannock River. That system is still intact, and it's proposed for reuse for the data center cooling. The Birchwood development, the redevelopment of the site for a data center campus will require some potable water. They will have some staff present on the site. So they're proposing that they will use the existing commercial groundwater well for potable water, but they foresee, future growth and future need for additional water sources. So what they're proposing is this MOU would provide that in the event that the Board of Supervisors grants the land use approvals for the data center campus, and that the state regulatory entities who have control over certain permitting issues with the water intake subject to their approval, Birchwood would sell a minimum of 600,000 gallons of raw water a day to the service authority. The price would be subject to negotiation. This agreement would take potentially up to a year. The parties' negotiations after the land use approvals. In addition, Birchwood is willing to dedicate a 12 to 15 acre site for public utility uses, most likely a water treatment plant. The raw water from the rivers currently that was used by the power plant and is proposed to be used by the data center would need very little processing for those purposes, but for human consumption and potable uses, it would require treatment. And so that would be part of the plan of action. The acquisition of surface water and a site for a water treatment plant would help position the service authority to transition from groundwater wells to surface water or river water. And this is needed due to the limited resources of the Potomac Aquifer. The existing wells are having difficulty, and future growth in the county is kind of suspended, having lack of a different source of water. So this would be a path forward, but once again, this is a memorandum of understanding. It's a statement of intent. It's essential terms for future negotiation of a water agreement. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So are there any questions for Ms. Lackey?
Yes, there is. Thank you. I like that you said future negotiations, because I know one of the concerns I have is it is very well known that Mr. Miller, you can clarify that. Looking at projections up to 2040, we need a lot more than that amount that is in that agreement to service our current customers and any future customers possible. So my concern always is that that's the bare minimum.
Is there any other questions for Ms. Lackey? Any other comments?
I'll just add in comment because I agree with what Spencer said about being an MOU. I have also some other questions that I think that we need to further look into, but for the purposes of being able to do that, I think this is needed, right?
Yes. So here's kind of my take on it. It's an MOU. It's not written in stone, and it's just a starting point for negotiations. We would like more water than the 600,000 gallons minimum. I think there's probably more water to be had as designs and whatnot move down the road. So I think it's possible to get much more than that. But we do need a place to start, and 600,000 gallons is better than zero, where we're currently standing, and an option to put a water treatment plant on a parcel of land that we also don't have to necessarily pay for is a good starting point for getting stuff down the road. Is it the final end all be all? No, but I think it's a starting point for meeting the county's needs. So with that, I guess if there's no other.
Ms. Lackey, the dedication of the land, is there a specific land right now that they're looking at, or are we still looking at multiple properties?
So in the MOU contemplates certain properties. They're all along Kings Highway in the corridor where the data center campuses are proposed. So the site is yet to be determined, but they propose some specific parcels of land that they own or control.
Do we feel like all those lands are going to work for what is needed, or are we going to be able to study it to make sure that it's going to work?
So if I may answer that question, so in our discussions with our engineering team, the estimate was like 12 to 15 acres would be necessary to have a water treatment facility constructed and operating, at some point in the future. So that's what we provided to them for information, and that's what they are saying to us.
I'm going to ask another question. It might sound stupid, but I know that certain land can only handle certain things. So I'm just, engineering needs to be done on the land to make sure it can handle it, I suppose. Or
so no,
I think that we would obviously, I think you'll have to as we go forward. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you'd have to design for it, but there's nothing that can't be built on anything, right? If you want to build something in the middle of a swamp, it can be done. It just costs more money. You're talking about basically raw open land. There's nothing out in King George that's going to prevent anything of this nature from being built. You're going to be pretty much on pretty standard designs out here. You might end up on some piles if the loads are higher, which you do see on water treatment plants and whatnot in Spotsy and up in Stafford in some cases if the loads are super high. But out here, you should be able to build anything you need. It's just a question of, is it a little bit more or less expensive than if you could just do shallow foundations or whatnot, but nothing's unbuildable to any severe extent out here.
So question on that, since I know that you have this background. this could it be, is it just a mere like, a couple of thousand, or could it be 100,000 of difference of the buildability of it?
So in all likelihood, there's probably nothing that's going to make this more expensive. In general, a water treatment plant is lighter than, from a ground impact standpoint, is lighter than the ground itself. You're going to dig a giant hole in the ground and you're going to replace it with water. Water's got a unit weight of 62.4 pounds per cubic foot, and dirt around here is roughly in the 130 pounds per cubic foot range. When you replace that, when you swap that out, like a swimming pool is lighter than the hole that you dug. So it should influence the ground less. You shouldn't have much settlement. You're probably going to be running on mostly shallow foundations here. It's unlikely to do anything different. You may have some weird problem with acidic soils. It would cause you to have to use acid resisting concrete, which is only marginally more expensive than normal concrete. Sounds fancy, but it's not really. It's a bunch of additives added. So there's not a likelihood that you're going to be seeing anything significant. You're not on the river. You're not likely to run in. You're not sitting, as long as we're not sitting on a wetland and there's really soft ground that you have to play with remediating. It's probably a pretty straightforward construction. That's about as cheap as you're going to get, because it's just an open field in the middle of solid ground.
I would also add that because it's an MOU and this is like the start of a placeholder, we would obviously entertain whatever sites that they might provide to us. We would start researching those and looking at the ability to handle a treatment facility, and then we would zero in on the one that's best for us. I think, as Ms. Lackey indicated, this is the start of the process, and you would shore this up over time.
Yeah, and generally what you would do is, if you have multiple sites, you'll do test bores to see how the soils and whatnot look on each site, and you can select from there which one might be better from a cost standpoint for construction.
But is this negotiable then? Because it doesn't say anything about that in the dedication of area. That's why I was asking.
So it does suggest that there are specific parcels they have in mind. But, if we encounter different problems, if they acquire more property in the area, or there's changes, it could even be on the Service Authority side. Maybe we relocate a better site for it. But this is a prospect. This is largely what this is something that, we'd have to run the financials, see the feasibility, and make sure it all works out in the end. But this would be indicative that we want to pursue this and seriously consider it.
So the abbreviated version is engineering says we need 12 to 15 acres to build this type of facility, and they said they'll carve out a minimum 17 acre parcel for the facility, correct?
Yeah, they're going to carve out a minimum of what we need for an expanded facility, not just specifically this, but for the overall, I think, 2 million gallon a day potential facility. I think is what we're talking about on the larger acreage. So initially, this would be the smaller version that could be expanded, but yes, they're giving us a carve out for enough acreage to do what we would need to do.
But Mr. Chair, this is still negotiating, so it could change. And then my question is, for the land, are they giving it, or do we have to pay it back?
So they've used the term dedication. So that indicates that they are not intending to charge. They are going to reserve easements on the property because they do want to utilize this facility for their own potable water needs. So that they have some skin in the game. They want to see this happen, and they do have some direct benefit from it.
So you just said they would like to use it for their uses, correct? Possibly.
So they would, I'm not the engineer here, but they would like to pipe some of the treated water to their proposed campuses for the flushing toilets and the kitchens and those types.
No,
They want to get rid of the well on site at some point in the near future.
Yeah, because DEQ, I'm sure, would like them to get rid of the well on the site. But my last question is, how does this stand with any other application? Because this is one application, and as our audience members, the people who spoke in public comment, there is another application. Does this conflict?
So I would say that, there's possible compatibility with other uses. As the public commenters did notice, there is a provision in the current drafting requested by Birchwood that would limit the sale or the conveyance of raw water to third parties. But that's something that could be subject to change. I can't predict the future to see what will happen. And as Mr. Parker's noted, we're also going to be actively looking for other sources of water. So I don't think this is the end of, sources of water for the county. But the 600,000 gallons per day is a minimum. It could be greater, and there could be potentially different sources of water.
Mr. Chair, and follow up, that would be another concern, is limiting who we can sell water to. That would be a concern also, especially if that was a clause in there.
Well, I think that, and Ms. Lackey can quote the legal part of that. I don't believe that that's allowed. And we certainly wouldn't want to advocate that you would enter into any agreement that would just be one-sided. That you would, the water that you need is not necessarily just for these potential developments. The water is for the county's needs, ultimately, to get off of groundwater. And everybody's quoting the minimum 600,000. So the study that was done by TRC at the time was Draper Aden, was 600,000 gallons a day minimum was the immediate need. And then it went up to, like, I think 1.2, and then it ultimately goes to 2 million by 2040, like Ms. Bender had quoted. So, and that study is available. It's not something that's not intended for public use. If anybody's interested in that information, we do have it available.
Are there any other questions or comments? All right. I guess we're looking for a motion on the action item.
I move that we accept the proposed memorandum of understanding with Birchwood Power Partners for surface water and the land dedication.
Second.
I have a motion made and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. All those opposed?
I said aye with reservations.
Okay. So there's no opposed. Chair votes aye, motion carries. So we've accepted the memorandum of understanding. Interim General Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question concerning Fairview Beach well, as you know, there are supposed to be 3 wells for Fairview Beach. There is the existing well site in Fairview Beach, and then there are 2 wells there, and then there is a 3rd well that is in the Potomac Landing subdivision. That well, years ago, and I'll refer to Patty if she's got a date on that, but it began pumping sand, so it's no longer operational. The plan is, under the money that the county is to get from VDH, the $5 million, the plan is to have a 3rd well installed in Fairview Beach. At this point, no determination has been made as to where that would go. It could go to the existing well site where the operational wells are in place, or it could go to the area by Potomac Landing where the old well was, and would just be moved over, to another area. We had an official from VDH out probably this time last year with our folks from TRC, and they were basically looking at all of the wells that were due to be replaced, and they identified some locations, and so they do have some idea of where they could put it, but nothing at this point has been official at this stage. Like I said, it is due to be funded through that grant, and I believe the timeline on the Fairview Beach well, they would love for it to be probably tomorrow, but that's not at this case, not at this place. We're ready for that yet. But I do believe we have like 2 years under the restrictions on that. Was that the question? Was it about the Fairview Beach well,
Yeah.
the
and-
new one, or is it about the operations? Because we do have Imboden here if you want to talk about
No,
operations.
it's the new one that I was asking about. The locations that the engineers said that it could be placed. Do we know those, or can we know those?
Like I said, you could put it at the existing well site, which is in Fairview Beach, which is down, by
Okay, the ones that you had
Kim's.
just stated.
Or you could put it at the Potomac Landing site, which is, you'll see it. You can.
Okay.
It's it's not an operation because it was pumping sand, but there's a area that people identify as a well. So that's the possibility as well. But we just haven't zeroed in on that at this point.
Okay.
And I'll be this will be a project that's obvious. It's not secret or anything like that. It's just a matter of they just need to kind of figure out the best place for it where, the depths that they would have to go and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you do have a to-do list update, and happy to go through that if you would like. These are the non-capital items. The main one on here would be the automatic metering project. 2 out of the 3 are complete. 9 of 12 collectors have been installed. To date, 3,200 AMI meters are installed. Approximately 3,000 of the AMI meters are installed, reporting consistently. We have about 1,150 meters left to replace with AMI meters, and those are in the Fairview Beach, Potomac Landing, Bayberry, Eden Estates area, and Dahlgren. Ms. Norris Barker, if there's any other update on this, I know that this project has been escalated a little bit, accelerated. They're moving it forward a little bit quicker than we had anticipated, which is good. Will be good for the customers, but Ms. Norris Barker has been handling that, and the maintenance crews have been working with the team from Fortiline. But I don't want to have to call on you if there's anything that I'm adding that I need to add or you want to add to it. I think overall it's going well. 2/3 of the project. Okay. All right. Thank you. The ARPA water grant from VDH, that is executed, and we're receiving reimbursements on some of the projects. I know that the one well that we're working on is the Arnold's Corner well. That's one of the ones that's scheduled to be replaced sooner than some of the other ones, but there's a whole series of wells. We can get that information to you all so that you are refreshed on what the plan on what the use of those funds was going to go towards. Wastewater grant, we're finalizing the details to receive reimbursements. That is the bigger grant, obviously, the $16 million grant. The infiltration and inflow program, which is primarily in the Dahlgren area, we're procuring inspection services right now. That's something that Bryce Young is handling. And the other 2 items, development review projects, that's just working with community development on what goes on with developments that are going to be on the water and sewer service. And then the fire hydrant and maintenance replacement, that's ongoing. That's working with fire and rescue on identifying the various hydrants that are in place or that are in service. We obviously have some that are at times, they aren't operational, and so we have to address those, and maintenance crews working with them on that. So there's another page to that rate plan implementation. So the rates effective July 1, 2023. They'll apply to meter reads August 2023, and they will be reflected on your billing date of the September 15th. Low-income housing water assistance. We were notified on last Friday that the funds have been depleted. And so we received about $15,462 on behalf of about 26 customers. Yeah, we'll check in to see if that can be continued and if we can receive some additional funding. Obviously, that was important to those customers. Arnold Corner well replacement, that is one of the projects that is identified to receive the Virginia Department of Health grant funds. And so the plans are under review and we are getting ready to start the bidding process for that one. SAFT well replacement, which has nothing to do, as you may remember, with the existing SAFT well. This is the new SAFT. The existing SAFT well, John, have the maintenance or have all the parts and equipment arrived yet, or are we still start next week on the existing well? And that process will really be a big shot in the arm because, as you know, with that well down, the whole system is being greatly affected by, with that project or that well being out. But there is another SAFT well. We're talking about SAFT 2, and that's the one that is also set to get funding from the VDH grant. Perkins Corner decommissioning wastewater treatment plant. Engineering work is proceeding. RK&K is doing that. A preliminary engineering report has been submitted. Design work is beginning. And then, as you know, the transition to surface water, we just had a good discussion about that. That is also ongoing as well. Let me point out a couple of things just before your schedule. Do we have that up there? Chris, is there a schedule? So again, you don't meet again until August 1st, and then you would meet again on the 15th of August. This is the only meeting in July. So this is an email that I received with the Exchange Public Facilities participants. This is regarding the WQIF program and the nutrient and the phosphorus credits that we have. We sold credits, and so people bought them. So the Service Authority is going to get about $61,000 back, and those will come in the form of a check. So any kind of funding that we had to pay for the violations under the DEQ WQIF program that we recently had you all authorize, those will come back into the Service Authority, and so we're actually in the black by about $20,000. On the next page, if you forward that, I don't know if you can see up there, but essentially the Dahlgren got about $27,000 worth of credits, and Hop Yard got about $24,000 worth of credits, and then Oakland Park got about 4,000, and it looks like Fairview Beach got about 5,256. So the total is about 61,000 and some change, which is good news. We're very excited about that, and I owe it to our day trader, Miss Jessica Washington, who put this together, and we were able to get this to the folks that are running this exchange program. And I'll defer to Imboden. They are here, and so if you have a question about specifically how these exchanges work, we do have some of their personnel here if anybody's interested. But it is something that's going to come back to us for some revenue, and that is it from my standpoint. I know we do have Imboden. Due to the fact that we only have one board meeting, they obviously aren't able to provide you with a major report, because that report is based on data that does not get done until the 10th of every month. So they'll provide obviously a report to us that we'll get for you at the August 1st meeting for the previous month. But I know they are here, Mark Imboden, John Simmons, and is it Ben or Daniel? Daniel Bradford with Imboden. And so if you would indulge one of them. I guess you guys have any kind of updates you want to do? A little mini update?
So yes, as Mr. Miller pointed out, we will be submitting our report. We've committed to at least 3 to 4 business days after the 10th to complete that report, because we are literally waiting to the 11th hour on the 10th to receive information back from various sublabs. So that is one of the reasons that the report is not able to be even presented before the first meeting. It has to be postponed into the second meeting. Chris, I'm not sure if you want me to go into some of the detail about lead and copper rule, the EPA lead and copper rule revisions. Our company looks at horizons, and we try to see what is coming down from EPA and different rulemakings. One of the most pressing ones is the EPA lead and copper rule revisions. For short, we call it the LCR of 2021. That was recently approved by EPA and passed by Congress. And these rule revisions require all community water systems, as well as non-transient water systems, to develop an inventory of its distribution system, as well as service laterals, including service laterals after the meter. And so that means creating an inventory to identify potential lead pipes. But this inventory is also going to take into account galvanized pipes that are in need of replacement, as well as non-lead pipes, which would be considered copper, plastic, polyethylene, as such. So this is quite a huge undertaking. It's going to involve a significant amount of community development. One of our programs that we have is the lead and copper rule revision program that we assist all of our municipalities that are under our purview. We are assisting them in developing the lead service line inventory as it needs to be submitted to VDH by September of 2024. And BDH then has a deadline to submit those inventories, once reviewed by the state, to the EPA, the federal level, in October of 2024. So there's a lot of work, literally a lot of in the field legwork that needs to happen before September. If it's found that there are lead service line inventories and there's lead service lines or unknown or galvanized that are requiring replacement, and a system of this size, there's going to be, it's just how it is. A lot of our other utilities that, it's certain there's going to be present, those that will need to be replaced. So the whole goal is to replace all of these lines, and in conjunction with this inventory, there has to be a lead service line inventory replacement plan. And so we have to submit that as well. So we've provided the county a proposal, and I think the county is evaluating that now. 2 different tracks that you could potentially take. One is your field service guys, your maintenance crew, which know the facility well, know the distribution system, know service lines. You guys just went through and replaced all these water meters, so they understand what is the extent of our distribution system, particularly the service laterals. It's most of the distribution piping in King George is known. What is really unknown is what is installed after the meter. And so that is where the lion's share of the work is going to come from. And so our proposal includes 2 tracks. One is you guys doing the field service work yourselves, or track 2 is having our team come in and evaluate the system and doing the legwork for you. But apart from that, there's a huge desktop side of it, we call it, that has to take place. And that's primarily where the lion's share of the work comes in. And it includes a GIS database that we've developed, online portals for people to log into and communicate, their service laterals. So there's a lot involved here, and it's highly evidence based as well. And so we can't just check a box and say, yeah, this one's good. Well, we have to provide evidence that there is no evidence of lead or it's a plastic pipe. That can include pictures. It can include testing of the pipe material, doing a magnet test, a lot of different information. And so, be happy to take any questions regarding this development from EPA.
Does anybody have any questions?
So the line between the meter and the home, if it has to be replaced, who bears the cost of that? Us or the homeowner?
And that is something that is extensively under, not contest, but under discussion. There are federal dollars that will be provided localities for the replacement. But that is still something that is being worked out. We've dealt with some utilities where they say, we're just going to take care of it because it's a requirement, it has to be done, so we're just going to do it. We can't rely on the homeowners to get it done. Other localities that may be a little more strapped for the utility budget, saying we're just going to provide an inventory, and our plan is going to be we'll require the homeowner to replace it, which is a huge cost to the homeowner as well. And so we're trying to we're in a series of meetings, including roundtable events with other state legislators, state regulators, as well as other localities, and that is the primary topic of discussion. Who finances that? Certainly the service or the line replacement, if it's a distribution line, that would be a utility-owned system. But items past the meter, that's historically been on the customer's side and under the customer's responsibility. So that is still under discussion, and unfortunately, I just don't have the answer.
So once again, we get a federal mandate, but no plan on how to finance it.
That's correct.
With deadlines on meeting this, but again, we don't know where the money's coming from.
We don't have to replace it by 2024. The only thing that we have to provide is an inventory. So we have to say yes or no, that's a lead pipe, or that's a galvanized pipe, or that's a non-lead pipe. The second thing is if we have a galvanized pipe that requires replacement, or we have a lead pipe that requires replacement, we have to develop a lead service line replacement plan. And it's simply that. It's just a plan. That's what we would have to meet. And there's still discussions on what does the plan look like? How is that constructed? How can we outline that and provide that to the state? So there's a lot of unknowns, and the unknowns are coming from the state level, which promulgates federal regulations. And so there's still a lot of questions that have been asked, but yet to be answered.
Thank you.
But those are valid questions.
And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Miller, but I seem to remember that this AMI water meter replacement has basically documented most of the laterals material already. I guess that would leave all the unmetered connections. There are the few unmetered connections we have running around.
That's correct. They are doing that as part of their work. And we are going to meet actually tomorrow to assess what the Emboden team had put together, but then also, what other options that we have, because I think it could be a two-prong effort, but it's a big undertaking, and we're aware of that. But fortunately, part of the Florida Line project, they have been documenting all this information. So
are we going to at some point have to put meters on the unmetered lines, or is that?
I don't know. Ms. Norris Barker, you want to approach, please?
There's currently 45 unmetered customers. And the reason they have never been metered is access to the property, finding their service lateral, because what we would do is to find the service and install a meter there, cut it and install the meter. But that has been since the original metering project, when I first came here in 97, that was the first metering project. There was 45 identified at that, well, there was 55 identified at that time, and we have, over the years, located 10 of those. So currently it's 45 that are unmetered.
I'm just thinking you're probably gonna, if you have to find those laterals to figure out what they are, you're probably gonna, it's probably a good time to install meters. If we're gonna, if we're gonna spend all that money to find them. Because I think that's gonna be the hard point, it says 45.
Service lines can be classified as unknown, but all unknown lines will fall under the requirement for replacement.
If one last item, I know at the last meeting, in the report, there was a mention of a discharge at Hop Yard, and I think there were some questions about that. And so I've certainly had conversations with the Imboden team. First thing I would point out is that discharge, there are discharges every day. And the reason that it was a problem for Imboden, as I think they indicated, and I'll let Mr. Imboden talk about this, is that the lab where you would do normally test was not available that day. It was closed. And so when they were doing their discharge, they tested, but they didn't test all of the samples because they couldn't get that because the lab was closed. So it's not certainly a discharge like the extent of a discharge that happened in Dahlgren in January of 2022 or Perkins or anything like that. It's something, it was a controlled situation. It's under the permit, it's authorized, but it was because of the fact that they couldn't do the testing that presented the problems. And I'll certainly refer to you on that as well if you want to clarify even more.
Really, in a nutshell, there was an E. coli sample that was unable to be analyzed from the sub-laboratory. So all of the parameters were collected and inspected, including pH, dissolved oxygen, other aesthetic qualities that we characterize each and every day. The entire process was verified that it was operating normally. And so when someone says a discharge, it's not necessarily an unregulated discharge. We discharge every day. We have an outfall to discharge. If we don't discharge, we'll have an overflow, which has other things that are tied to that. So the problem is the 4th of July, or not the 4th of July, the Memorial Day holiday fell on a day where the discharge occurred, but the laboratory was unable to pick up the sample, carry it to the lab, and analyze that sample due to insufficient lab staff to analyze an E. coli sample. So that was the extent of what happened at Hop Yard.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Anything else, Mr. Miller?
I would just also add that in the Imboden personnel have indicated that if any of you all or any board of supervisors or anybody interested in having a tour of the facilities and getting a kind of a tutorial on the operation of either water or wastewater plants or both, please let me know and we'll set that up because they are certainly available to do that and they're certainly very capable at providing a good overview of how things are operating.
I encourage it. It allows you to kind of see that perspective in the field perspective. And we will make available for a plant tour at any time. So we have a project manager or assistant project manager, our compliance manager, or even myself, be happy to come up and take anyone and everyone that would be wanting to take a tour of the facilities. And that doesn't only include board members, but anyone in the public that wants a guided tour of these facilities. We do that all the time. There are County Chamber of Commerce that have events at a lot of our facilities, and we take them through tours of our plants. We teach them, tell them about water and wastewater treatment. where their wastewater goes and where their drinking water comes from. And so it's about a community, and it's about involving the community as well. And we found that to be very beneficial in everything that we do. Chris, did you want me to bring up the other part with the lead 90 percentile for VDH? Okay, I'm not sure what they all know about it, but in 2022, we have a triannual requirement to test for lead and copper. It's a series of 20 samples throughout the distribution system, and it monitors for lead and copper, and we have to meet certain thresholds, and it's called the 90th percentile. And so if we collect 20 samples, 18 of those or 19 of those have to meet EPA limits. Well, in 2022, the samples were collected as required. We got notification a couple weeks ago that there was an indication that 2 of those samples did not meet the requirement for lead. Now, it could be one of 2 things. It could be sample error, it could be lab error. We're not sure. But VDH has recommended that, and it's our recommendation as well. We have a full report on what we're recommending, is to do an additional series of 20 analysis to go out through the distribution system, collect another series of samples to either validate or to invalidate that initial series of samples. It's purely optional for the county, but it's our recommendation that we do that, and we're proceeding in that manner. We've been authorized to go ahead and collect these additional samples. There is going to be an evaluation from VDH to assess the corrosivity of our water, and lead does not come from source water. It doesn't come from the ground. It comes from different pipes and such, and most of the time it's household plumbing. And so if there's one of the samples was collected at an older complex that had known piping that was pre-1986, before the ban of lead solder and lead pipes to be used in common plumbing. And so the lead never comes from source water. It always comes from, most of the time, interior household plumbing. And so that's really where we believe this is coming from. But we're doing this additional series of 20 to make sure that there are no issues, and if it comes back that we meet that 90th percentile requirement, VDH will not require us to go to additional monitoring, and they won't require us to add additional treatment enhancements, which could include additional additives into the drinking water to make the water less corrosive. And so that's kind of where we're at with that. There's a litany of public notification requirements that we are working with the county staff. We've prepared working documents for them to provide out in the water bills, and so you guys will be seeing those coming shortly. But we've kind of set up a system where people can respond if they have questions, and it'll notify our compliance department if people in your distribution system do have questions. So we'll field those questions from your community ourselves and answer any concerns that they would have.
I have two questions. One is, could you send the copy of the letter that you're going to send out to Mr. Miller to distribute to us? And then second, I thought of when you were explaining that you even love the community. Is there a way that we can arrange sometime in August or September to advertise, to have a day of a tour so that we can advertise to the public and to the staff? If you can coordinate that, whichever is best for you in August or September.
Absolutely. We would love to accommodate that. And it could be a select facilities. It could be majority facilities. I don't think we could go to everyone every day. But it could be a series. Over the months we could visit everyone, and you guys can kind of see what's going on at those facilities.
I just think it would be really good for the public. It might, as that one customer found out, it's a little more complicated, and it might be good. So if we could coordinate, I think that might be a really good idea. Thank you.
Certainly.
Is there anything else, Mr. Miller? All right, I guess we're just looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I actually had a question for Mr. Miller.
Okay.
The issuance of the credits which is great news because we
Yes,
always
ma'am.
talk about bad news. So I love
Yes.
this. Okay. So I just want to bring this up again. This is great. And I think it's a great positive announcement. I have a couple questions about this. How often is this granted?
Will defer to Mark on that, but my understanding, I think it's an annual process, is it not, that you can do these, you can put your credits up on kind of like the open market and people bid on them? Is that correct?
Pretty much. It's kind of a name your price for your credits, and then DEQ will pick the lowest priced credits, lowest 14, I believe it is. But they have a dollar amount. So the dollar amount that you saw in that letter, that is the amount that DEQ had to purchase credits to disperse them to facilities that did not or did not meet permit limits in regards to their general nutrient permits. The county met all of the requirements of the general nutrient permits, had an excess and abundance of credits to share for nutrients, and we were able to assess how many credits that we had available. We crunched a lot of the data and sent it over for the county to send over to DEQ, and we prepared kind of a three-prong option for the county to choose from. And we kind of chose the middle of the road. You can see that there's high variability in the credit price. We're at 4.5, whereas some you're seeing 14, 21. But this is kind of like a bid. You submit your bid, so we don't really know where we would have fell inside of this market, but we're near the lower side, but we still our take was, do you want a lot of a little or a little of a lot? Or do you want to just be completely dismissed from the running altogether because you could price yourself out? And so that's kind of the approach that we took. Now that we have, we went through one cycle of this. Next year, when we provide the data again, we'll probably reconfigure some of our analysis. It's a statistical analysis that we did to determine what would be the best fit to sell our credits. But right now, and you have to be on the exchange to sell your credits. But right now, everyone kind of sees what the pricing market is, and so the ones that are on the higher side, they're going to trend lower, and the ones on the lower side, they're going to see, well, I can trend a little higher. And so the grouping, if you will, is going to get a lot tighter in the years to come. So don't necessarily have a good trend yet, but we're fortunate that we were able to get some money back, some funds back for the county.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, great job.
Is there any other comments? All right, looking for a motion.
I move that we adjourn to August 1st, 2023 at 5:30 in the Robert H. Combs boardroom.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. We are adjourned to August 1st, 2023 at 5:30 PM here in the boardroom.